Jordon Spitters, Eximus Real Estate. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
So, Jordon, a couple of things going on. I mean, you're located in the Fraser Valley, Lower Mainland, beautiful British Columbia. We got two key topics that we want to hit on. First of which is some changes to what BC Housing is doing and their Homes for People plan, if you will. I love the title of that particular document. But as well, we want to touch on the changes to foreign buyers and what that might mean to us as well. So let's kick it off and let's really talk a little bit about what Dave Eby, Premier of British Columbia, has said and what they want to do within British Columbia. And what do you think about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, any step forward, I think, is a step in the right direction. I like some of the announcements that they made. I think it's a little bit nebulous. So I don't know when or how some of this is going to get implemented. Of course, there's always new taxes announced whenever there's new initiatives. So that the good comes with the bad. But there's three main announcements that were bundled up in this Homes for People initiative. And the first one is that they're going to be focusing on what they call missing middle development. So allowing 3 and potentially 4 unit housing in what would traditionally have been residential building lots. Yeah. So we're talking triplexes, fourplexes in much smaller spaces that were previously zoned for single family residential homes, which is pretty exciting. We need that kind of forward thinking.
Yes. Well, that was in let's give it a little bit more context. As I read that report, I'm with you. It was a little bit light on details, but let's trust that they're going to fulfill on it. We'll see what happens. But they have gone into and looked at what New Zealand had done a few years ago, not that long ago. Mm-hmm. And what New Zealand had done was taken and literally changed zoning of single family residential to multi, being anywhere, I want to say up to 4 units, maybe 5 units in the multi space. But the results were quite, stark in terms of Auckland had put in the change earlier and it started moving earlier. But it was really quite stark. Like it was a definitive and a definite shift in permits and the work that was being done in terms of housing. So that was a kind of I guess proof was in the pudding that this actually is viable. New Zealand had done it. No reason that we can't do it. And I think that was one of the inspiring factors of making that decision. Yeah, there's some controversy. Well, you said 3. Let's go through the list of what you saw as the big changes.
Absolutely, yeah. So New Zealand is informing their decision-making process. They're also looking at state of Oregon. They have a Missing Middle Development Act, and then the state of California as well has a Home Development Act that is kind of bringing in these new regulations. So that's interesting. I mean, we have no dates, we have no information outside, but let's see how that plays out. Then they were discussing allowing secondary suites in all municipalities in British Columbia. Mm. So, I mean, that's pretty good. Once again, light on details. Does that mean that it's going to supersede municipalities' OCPs? Does it mean that it's going to be removing restrictive covenants placed on building lots by cities that restrict secondary dwellings? We don't know, but they're at least looking to the fact that there's a lot of existing households that have the ability to add a secondary dwelling and increase the density. And we need municipalities to get out of the way and allow people to do this.
Well, I think it's an interesting point is that, they probably do supersede. They have the power to do that. I think that's what they're talking about doing. They're trying to get some of the municipalities out of the way in terms of moving that forward. To your point, we'll see how that plays out, how it rolls out. But when you look, you need to only look into Alberta, you look at Calgary, and, part of what has to happen in that is the way I understood that, and maybe the details of it, Jordon, is that so it gives me permission to rent out a basement suite in the home that I'm living in. That was the key to that. But where I thought it might be a little bit light on details was in terms of, what does that mean in terms of what we have to do for heating, what we have to do for egress, what do we have to do in terms of the safety precautions in that regard? And I think that was a little bit light in detail. And again, we're assuming that they're going to, once this passes, it's got to be passed. I think they're taking a vote on it or some such thing before this fall. Do you have any other insights into that part of it?
No, nothing so far. I mean, so to put a little bit of context on this, when we had that announcement from Eby's government about the removal of the rental restrictions from the Strata Property Act for any units that are less than 55 age restricted, all buildings entirely, and the removal of age restrictions for less than 55-year buildings, it happened immediately. It was overnight. They said this is in effect tomorrow, and it was a little bit. We got blindsided by a little bit. It was a surprise, a welcome surprise, but it was in effect right away. Whereas with this, it's nebulous. You know, they're going to be discussing it this year, with some of it being implemented next, and like there's no dates, there's no information, because you're right, they have to do all this consultation with the municipalities, and as much as they can steamroll, I don't know if that's going to be their imperative.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, you know, it's politics, so they will be politically, you know, sensitive to what's going on. So you're right, they're not going to steamroll it, I don't think. But at the speed the government moves, let's put it this way, they're doing this because housing is a problem. You know, there isn't enough of it. There's not enough rental inventory. There's just not enough inventory, full stop. And, you know, the government is tasking themselves, or they're being tasked to solve the problem. And, you know, I can't help but be a little bit skeptical and sarcastic, is that, you know, the speed of which we need housing relative to how quick the government can actually move and execute on a plan. There seems to be always quite a gap between those two things. So as much as I see that they've made the change, or they're suggesting the change, I'm always a little bit skeptical about what they'll do to execute. So anyways, that's
until we see shovels in the ground. I mean, take it at face value, but you know, with a grain of salt, a healthy grain of salt. The next announcement, actually further to the basement suite or the secondary suite, they're also announcing an initiative to have a loan for up to $40,000 over 5 years to recover some of the cost of installing those suites. In order to qualify, there's some hoops that you need to jump through, including renting it for below market rent for up to 5 years.
For 5 years.
Exactly. And they don't quantify what's below market rent, and, you know, who sets market rent. Do we want government to be setting market rent and then telling us what that happens to be? I mean, if you're getting money back, sure, you want to play that game, but you know, it's a difficult number to quantify, because every property is unique. So, well,
there's something there that's a really great point, Jordan, that every property is quite unique. And so what is the bar and the benchmark? What's also interesting is that the devil is always in the details. And so a few years ago, Edmonton had ran a plan that said, okay, we're going to give you $20,000 grant, landlords, to put basement suites in houses, and you get 20 grand. It is conditional. It's actually, you don't have to repay it. It's in fact not a loan. But there was a condition, and the conditions were that it was meant to bolster affordable housing. So if you weren't really understanding what that meant, is that you had to rent it to a household income, and I want to say was less than 50, but it might have been less than $40,000. So problematic is that you have a single family home in an area that doesn't really attract that level of tenant, and then in Alberta, you couldn't find anybody with a household income that was actually less than that, unless they were in fact on some kind of provincial support, whether it be welfare or AISH or whatever they had. So the point is, it was the quality of tenant was not what most landlords wanted to deal with, yet you were locked into it and or scratch a check for 20 grand. So these were all the things that were kind of going on in the background of that. Again, that was the devil in the details. So when we see a program that the government offers, it's going to be conditional. They're going to have something attached to it that says the reason that we're doing this is because. So I don't know what that's going to represent or how that's going to look.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're not really seeing any numbers here other than just a lot of kind of pretty platitudes. Like I said, it's moving in the right direction. I like that they at least have their eye on this. We'll see whether or not it actually comes into effect, and if it is effective. The next one that they had discussed was basically a housing supply act. They're going to be working directly with the municipalities to better direct how they handle developments of properties. And actually, one cool thing that they had discussed was changing the consultation process, rejigging it a little bit so that the OCP carried more weight in the development and would require more consultation with the public, rather than having the OCP put in place by way of the city and then having a consultation process on every single individual lot. And then you have, you know, the NIMBYism that comes with that. So they say, look, here's the parameters established by the OCP. Homeowners, if you have a problem with it, now is the time to come and speak to us about it, because once this is put in place, we're just going to start rubber stamping, or to a degree at least, rubber stamping homes within this OCP as long as they fall in line. And I think that is actually a really positive change. It will help to accelerate the process, so we're not getting stymied and hung up on every single lot because, you know, Grandpa Joe next door doesn't want his development, the next door neighbor's development lot split in two, or so on and so forth.
So for viewers that don't know what OCP, do you want to give them the
Yeah, OCP, so the official community plan. So the city has gone and said this neighborhood is going to be designated for this particular kind of housing. It's zoned this way, and it's trying to plan out the different neighborhoods of the city to increase density, increase walkability.
And I think, just to expand on that, and for the investors that are watching this, is, something that OCP, that community plan, is so important. And if you're looking at investing in a particular area and you want to find out what the heck's going on there, take a look at that OCP. It's available. I think it's available. Generally, it's going to be online, but you can pull that plan. You can have access to understanding some of the details of that plan, and it's important. I mean, you'll start to actually see what is going on.
Yeah, it's a roadmap to what the city's development plans are for the future.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, so we hope that it is not just politics. It is in fact policy, that they will move forward, that the NIMBYism won't shut them down, and that somebody will be brave enough to push back and go, no, we're expanding homes, and that's what we need to do. I can see all the reasons that they're going to get pushed back. I often will go to Langley, for example. I lived there years ago, and I go there now, and I'm going, wow, talk about an area that is booming development, but didn't have the infrastructure to support it. Now, I know there's some concerns with, Vancouver, for example, where they're going, we don't have the infrastructure in place to all of a sudden take these small lots, relatively small lots already, and put, 2 or 3, units on them, or even like a triplex, duplex kind of scenario. I don't know if you have a view on that. We can touch on it just lightly, but, that's some of the pushback I know people are giving.
Well, I mean, I think Vancouver has an advantage over communities like Langley because of they've less dependence on cars, right? Yeah. Langley, you can't get anywhere without having a vehicle. So every household has at least 1 or 2 cars. Yeah. And, trying to commute anywhere in Langley, Surrey it's not the easiest, especially during rush hour. And that's, I mean, the infrastructure challenges there. There's not enough roadways. There's not enough space to meet the demand for vehicles. I think Vancouver, has the advantage in the sense that folks have fewer vehicles, and outside of the utility infrastructure, they don't need to worry about roadways as much.
True. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see. Anyways, let's park that one and let's move on to, and just kind of do a quick recap. Something 90 days ago, the headlines were blaring. The government's putting their foot down. We're going to do foreign buyers. We're going to ban foreign buyers. And literally less than 90 days later, they're going, okay, well, we may have been a little hasty with that. We're going to back off and revise that plan. Do you want to touch on it a little bit?
Yeah, they've Swiss cheesed that regulation pretty healthily, poked some more holes in it. So they just loosened the restrictions on temporary resident workers as well. So if you have a temporary resident work permit with more than 183 days on it, you are allowed to purchase in Canada. But hang on, you're only allowed to buy one home.
Just one. Okay.
Just one.
Got it. Well, that's it. What else you got on your list? I know there's a few, so if we can talk through it, I've actually presented it, so I'm fairly familiar with it. But go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, they did have a bit of a change on how residential properties defined. So vacant land zoned for residential and mixed use can now be purchased by non-Canadians as well, and used for any purpose by the purchasers. So you can buy the lot and build it. So I mean, that opens up a pretty large. But
that was a big one. That change in that ability for land use and for a foreign buyer to buy land and do with it what they want that's a significant change in terms of getting stuff done.
Exactly. They've increased the threshold defining foreign control or direct or indirect ownership of corporations. So they've increased that to 10%. Now.
Another big one. And let's just dig into that a little bit for somebody who's going, what's the big deal? It really is as simple as, in the past, if you were bringing, foreign buyer or foreign capital into the country, and you were, let's say, doing a deal or capital deal, a joint venture deal, you have to form a corporation if you're going to go to that extent of building. And if the foreign owner had more than 3% ownership in that corporation, that was no go, more than 3%. They've now said, okay, that was a little restrictive. We're going to up it to 10%. So in fact, a foreign buyer can have as much as 10% of that particular corporation. And that's just kind of a broad overview of it. But that was the intention, was to not restrict it so tight that foreign capital couldn't come into Canada in a business deal to build a piece of real estate. So that was kind of the overview of that one.
Yeah. And then, there's some changes to the considerations for regulated entities, basically just discussing how they should carefully review the act and amend regulations to ensure they understand the scope and application of the prohibition. But I mean, overall, it went from no foreign ownership to you can, and okay, you can, and oh, you're fine too. So there's a pretty limited window of folks that are now prohibited from buying here. But I'd like to make the point that this is not making an impact the way that they think this is making an impact. It really, I mean, BCRE actually has a great graph available, and it was showing foreign investment and foreign home ownership in BC. And it was high in 2017, right? It peaked up and then it fell off a cliff completely after 2017. And it's been near zero ever since. And yet prices continue to steadily creep upwards.
Well, Jordan, Jordan, you made such a great point. But this is exactly what, I've said, many have said, is that fundamentally, we're having this issue around housing, affordable housing. Everybody should own a house. It's not fair that, young people can't get in. All of the stories that are happening right now continue to happen. First-time home buyers, my gosh, my 25-year-old or my 30-year-old child will never own a home. This is ridiculous. It's those darn foreign buyers, because everybody's looking to blame something. First and foremost, and this is my own rant around it, it's not one thing, it is multiple things. But the most important part of that conversation is that the government accepts no responsibility for their role in that housing. But what they do is they go politics over policy, squeaky wheel gets the grease, everybody's complaining about it. Those are my voters. I'm going to do something. So they go with this whole foreign buyers thing. And that's the politics of it. And that's the frustrating part of anybody who's in the industry and actually understands the industry, knows that there isn't a single reason. There's multiple reasons that we have for the housing shortage. And most of it starts with any one of three levels of government and bureaucracy that developers and builders are dealing with. And so that's my rant for the moment.
Yeah, no, I agree. And anybody that's plugged into the marketplace and knows what they're talking about, we're all screaming the same thing into the ether. We simply don't have the supply to meet the demand. And they're opening the floodgates. The demand continues to increase, but they're not building enough homes to supply that. So it's only going to get tighter and tighter. And picking a scapegoat and a group of people to blame for the problems, that's not solving anything either. It just adds extra layers of complexity and regulation and red tape, and it keeps bureaucrats employed, but it doesn't get butts into seats.
Yeah, it really bolsters the public service jobs. That's for darn sure. Bureaucracy begets bureaucracy. There's no doubt about that. But here's something that I think we need to shine a light on, for investors. We go back to supply, demand. We talk about affordability. And then ultimately, as investors, what do we want to know? Number one, we want to know that we can actually buy a piece of property, set it up to cash flow. So that means that we have to be looking at multiple units or the opportunity to build multiple units, duplex, triplex, fourplex, whatever that might be, number one. Number two, we want to know that we have clients. Well, this next 12 months, they're talking over 1 million people coming into this country. They're all going to need a place to live. Yeah. Affordability continues to be an issue. So as rental housing providers, what we do need to kind of remember is that we've got clients. Our job is to be that rental housing provider. Our rents are staying strong and actually have ticked up. And although they've slowed down in terms of the rise, they'll continue to be sustainable. So I think at the end of the day, Jordan, if they're working with an investor-focused realtor like yourself, if they understand what's going on in behind the scenes, what we can do is take off the issue of, well, what if housing crashes or if the rental market crashes? There's nothing that is shining any form of light on that possibility, short of a black swan event, which I guess we're really ripe for that given what's going on in the world these days. But at the end of it, people still need a place to live, and that's kind of my view of it right now.
Yeah, I mean, this idea that the house of cards is going to come crumbling down and everyone's just going to say, "Oh, I guess we're going to live in the woods." Doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't ring true to me. Even if, okay, so let's say there is some sort of an event like that, or maybe interest rates, kicked up and the market all of a sudden the values dropped and people had to sell. There's such pent up demand still that, it's going to take a really long time for something like that to happen, in my opinion. And it would need to be a pretty strong catalyst for that to occur. Right. At this point, homeowners are making their payments. They're doing what they can. They're hanging on. They're going to fixed rates. They're installing secondary suites to try to increase their income. You know, they're doing what they need to do, as we have done for generations and generations. And
Totally.
I don't think all of a sudden people are going to throw their hands up and just give up.
No. Here's a fundamental. I'll just share it one more time. You know, with what I like to point to people is this: is that in Canada, people pay their mortgages at this point. Most of Canada, if they want to be working, if anybody wants to be working, they're working, which is to say you've got income coming in. So as much pressure as we may feel in terms of bills, or people may feel in terms of their bill paying, ultimately what we know is Canadians will stick handle, they will get it figured out, and they will pay their mortgages. So delinquencies, by the way, I just looked at this stat, I presented it recently, is actually trending down. Now, that's not to say there isn't some distressed vendors out there, distressed sellers, but there is, and that's where some opportunities live for investors to go out and solve those problems. But ultimately, delinquencies are trending down at this point. That may shift later on this year. We'll see what happens, but still lots of opportunity in the market. And as always, Jordan, we appreciate the insights that you share and the time that you give us to give us these updates. So appreciate it. And for anybody looking to do deals in the Fraser Valley, reach out to Jordon Spitters at Eximus Realty, and the description contact will be in the description. Link will be in the description, as well as for those of you who are part of the RAIN community, reach out to the office, and the office will get you connected. So Jordon, once again, thanks, man.
Thanks so much for having me, Patrick. See you again.